Now, there's absolutely no doubt that AI is at the very beginning of its adoption S-curve. And if you're anything like us, our team, that has been equally exciting and terrifying. I think if we looked around or even questioned this room, you can swing wildly depending on the day, depending on what article you read. But as Fred said, we decided, how do we actually tackle that head on? So a number of months ago, we started to run experiments, which have accelerated over the last few weeks, to start looking at how can we potentially use the AI tools that are available to bring more value to our clients across the innovation process. Now, when I started to play with this, the excitement that I felt was only comparable to one other time in my life. The year was 1996. I was in year 8. My dad brought home a modem. My brother and I got in the study, plugged it in, started trying to find everything that we could going down this wormhole before someone called the landline and cut us off. Our Encarta CD-ROM was sitting on the other side of the room. We just got it from Christmas. It was completely discarded, and the world had truly changed forever. And this is what it actually felt when we started to do this, the excitement around what is possible. But what I want to share is a tempered version of this possibility. Is it going to throw out everything that we do? Are we talking about replacing humans? Are we talking about replacing creativity? Absolutely not. So let's talk about some of the areas that we have been playing and where we're finding value. And I hope in the next 10 or 15 minutes, I can share with you some of the experiments that we've run so it can shortcut how you might be able to do this in your process and accelerate what you're doing in innovation. So when we started this, we started to look at all of the possible tools across the innovation process. Now, there's a bit of a one born every minute kind of story going on if you think about tracking all of the different AI platforms that are available. There are startups every single day that are being launched around providing better NPS faster, transcribing your interviews, doing your research, even doing synthesis, and opportunities for, as we know, image generation as well. Now, this became slightly overwhelming because if you start to think about this, we're talking about ideally, possibly creating efficiencies was one of the first questions, but who wants to be using 7 different platforms in order to do this? So the new question became quite quickly, what is possible with ChatGPT alone? And this is what we want to share across a few of the processes that we use. Now, before I do this, again, to point to how fast all of this is moving, most of the experiments that we ran across the discovery, ideation, and then experimentation phases of the innovation process were run on the 3.5 version of that technology. And last Thursday, of course, they released 4, so you had to run them again. Now, the processing power of 4, as they have been sprouting at OpenAI, if you've been following this, they're talking about this being significantly better because of the reasoning capability that it has, and it's true, we have found that it certainly is. But how can we prove this? Because we know AI has the ability to hallucinate or lie and come up with all kinds of things that may or may not be true. So we decided to run an experiment using AI client, and Naked Ambition client projects that we had completed previously, or working with some of our very generous current clients to run some of these experiments to see if the outputs that it gave us were feasible and useful. Now, in the discovery process, we want to find out whether customers want what we are creating, whether the demand and desirability is there, but we're also asking bigger questions around whether we have permission to play in certain areas. Now, this first case study that I'll share is a large financial insurance organisation that we worked with in order to determine whether they had permission to play in the travel insurance space. Now, we conducted trends research for this client over a period of weeks. It took our team about 2 weeks to generate meaningful trends research. We ran the same questions through ChatGPT, and after a number of prompts, were able to generate some pretty decent trends research. So we were happy on some levels, but overall, the verdict on this, on trends, is it's somewhat viable. Now, it has the ability to do high-level market-wide scans. It can do that quick synthesis. It can point you in the direction of some of those blind spots and your team. But our recommendation at this point in time is as a jumping off board. It's more of a starting point for understanding what you might be missing. So determine those core areas to deep dive and then get your team to support it. So the second one that I'll touch on is competitor analysis. Who else is out there doing what we're doing? And we've heard about this from a few of the speakers today, the importance of understanding what is out there. Same example, competitor analysis took the team about a week and a half to get some meaningful perspective on who the big players were in the travel insurance space, specifically leaning into those who had a great user experience. Now, the competitor analysis done by ChatGPT actually surprised us. In the first instance, with very few prompts, it was able to generate what we would regard as pretty impressive in the space of a couple of hours, competitor analysis. And then as we pushed it for companies that were competing on great UX, it was even better. So the potential there is to even save a week or so of actual analysis time. So in terms of the viability and the verdict of this, we would say for competitor analysis in that scan, these sorts of time-saving or time-intensive exercises where a lot of data scanning is required at the top end of a process, definitely something to consider playing with. Now, the really hairy topic. So this has been a bit of a battleground creativity for AI for a long time. Okay? It's a hot topic and it's come up, and it even came up just then in Paris's conversations. We all wonder how far can or should it go? And it seems to be a bit of a fear for a lot of people. So we wanted to play with this, but more in the context of how AI could potentially be a co-partner, co-pilot. Now, ideation is not a solo sport, and that's definitely not something that we encourage people to do purely on their own. But what is the possibility of using AI even as a starting point? Now, before I jump into this, I think to be really practical, it's important to touch on prompts. I've used that language a couple of times here. And I think I want to explain what we did specifically to get ChatGPT to do what it does. Now, the prompt is the instruction for those of you who haven't had a chance to play with ChatGPT. And there are a couple of really powerful things that you can do in order to help it generate new ideas for you. And one of those is what's known as the persona hack. You can ask ChatGPT to behave as in a certain role or a certain entity and be really specific about the company that it's coming from. You can also ask it, or actually you get better results when it follows a chain of thought. So just like we would in a conversation, we start to build on each other, it's able to draw on the information that it has produced to essentially become smarter and more useful for you in the way it's designed. And then finally, this last one is to also ask counter questions. So this is more of a little lesser known hack, but actually trying to get ChatGPT to tell you why what it told you may be wrong. Okay, so getting it to question itself helps in the process as well. Now, this case study is from a client of ours that works in the building industry. So they're a manufacturing company working in the building industry. And the technique that we tried with them is known as combinatorial ideation, buzzword, buzzword, buzzword. That is a technique of combining two different forces into one potential idea. Now, in this case, we were looking at, could this client look at some of its best-selling materials that it sells B2B and then merge those with potential sustainable furniture, so go B2C. So what it generated here were three surprisingly unique ideas with strong knowledge of this client's materials as well. So building on that, we also used a technique, an end user or a key partner perspective. Now, I want you to act as a furniture designer and generate similar ideas. So same prompt, different perspective. Interesting perspective here, and something that we got quite excited about as a potential co-design opportunity. I won't go into all the things that you can do on the playground of OpenAI, but there's actual potential to program that in and of itself with your current personas. So your organisational personas to feed that data into it and then ask it to behave as your organisational personas generating these ideas. We then took those ideas into the image generator mid-journey and started to get it to mock up some of these concepts. So the prompt here, imagine, was around space-saving, multifunctional furniture. Now, just like we heard earlier on in Michael's presentation about some people who are highly visual just need to imagine. And I know definitely there are benefits to sketching in and of itself, but just being able to really quickly visualise an idea, we've found in these instances, helps people to then be able to creatively build on the ideas of others. The potential now with GPT-4 is you can even feed those images back in and generate more ideas again. So it becomes a perpetuating cycle of creativity alongside people. Here's another example of it here. So one really quick one I wanted to touch on as well are substitutions for sustainability. So if a company has a current product but are looking to make creative changes to that, or there are government requirements that they need to change, this one was quite interesting as well. So same client in the building industry wanted to improve the carbon consumption of a specific product that they have for better thermal performance. We asked ChatGPT together how this might be possible, and it came up with 3 ideas. 2 of those the team had already identified in the months that they've been working on this, and one was completely new, novel, and also feasible. The second one was a convenience store chain that were also exploring substitutions around palm oil. So how they can help their muffins to become more sustainable, removing palm oil. And it was able to generate 5 different possible recipes with the ingredients and the substitutions on the spot in about a minute. So the verdict on ChatGPT and Midjourney, we think viable, not completely alone, but working side by side with the creators inside organisations to go deeper than we can when we're just generating the ideas in the room. So again, advocating for that collaboration with us and the tool. So big potential for co-design here with your teams, and with just some basic AI literacy, we think it could significantly lift the quality of ideas and even help us to prioritise in the moment about what may actually be, we think about those desirability, feasibility and viability lenses. But we know when it comes to innovation that actually that ideas part is quite easy. So the other thing that we wanted to test was business modelling. So we took a few examples of business models that we have created for clients over the last number of years, and we fed those through with this here as well. So this one again was coming back to the financial services client. We looked at the business models that were created here, fed in prompts, and this actually is where ChatGPT provided a lot of surprises. We found that the business models that were created in here, even with a first prompt, were really impressive as a first pass. They were around 70% of what our team would have created in that first instance. Now, I'm not saying, and I think a lot of Strategyzer guys in the room would be like, okay, but are we expert enough at creating those? So of course there is a quality in, quality out, and the reverse, rubbish in, rubbish out, is going to be true as well. But I think for the practice of a lot of people in this room who might be completely new to this, and as in business modelling, being able to create an initial perspective on what that business model is, incredibly invaluable. And again, have tested this with clients who've given us a big nod on that as well. So the key here, if you're going to do this, is then to break the canvas out into each of its parts and drill down with specific prompts. So once you get the initial, it's give me more information about those key partners. We did this and it was able to give us so much information, again with this example, about where potential key partners that would contribute in that manufacturing example that I gave, key partners were even located around the world that they could collaborate with for some of these new materials. So specific prompts for each part of the canvas. So in our view, business model canvas, viable option. Again, it's a collaboration opportunity. Just use it as an initial contextual approach. It will require a manual overlay, particularly in the value proposition area. It's not successful there. Finally, experimentation. So this is very early for us, so just trying to use ChatGPT for an initial view around experimentation, I would say the results are still out. What we do see is it tends to generate some of the kind of more basic experiments that you would expect. A/B tests often suggests landing page to test customer demand, so around desirability. But one use case that we think is particularly interesting, following on from Paris's talk just now, is when it prompted for specific experiments, it can go into quite a lot of detail about how you would conduct that. So if we think about the list that Paris just provided, which was all the different experiments you could run across desirability, feasibility, and viability, you can ask it to give you instructions on how to run that. We did this with an example of the Sean Ellis test. The Sean Ellis test is essentially giving the customer a product, or potential customer a product or service to try. You then take it off them and ask them how upset are they to not be able to use this. If it's over 40%, it's a viable option. So something like that, where you can get really specific about the experiment, it can help you to create. Enough on experimentation, and let's kind of sum it up. If we took innovation process out of the equation, what else is the potential? Now, how fast, how smart is GPT-4? I just touched on briefly. Now, for those of you who are a bit further away and can't really read this, so in the over here in the blue is the capability of 3.5. Now, down here, we've got all of the major US exams. So over here on my right, that blue there is essentially your kind of humanities. So it's making light work of the arts degree that I did a number of years ago. If you go right over to here with that, where that big green bar is, that is the bar exam. So GPT-4 just passed the bar exam, and it can do calculus at a level of, what is that, 43%. And that's something that 3.5 could never do. So this is how fast it is going, and what does this mean for every one of you in your organisations, and what could you and should you be looking for? Now, ChatGPT, the conversational tool that is built on top of GPT-4, is just one use case for this. The really exciting possibility is building your own bots. So just like WordPress or any other website building platform, you can build on top of that, thinking about, bringing in all your different components to create a unique website that does what it does. That is what's possible with the open API on GPT-4, the one that Google just released last week, and others that are now coming to the market. So what does this mean? Rather than the hallucinations that you get with the large language models that exist now, because they're bringing in indiscriminately all of this data, you will be able to feed it your own data from your own organisation and train it on that to give you what you need. So in the legal profession, incredible. What can it do for healthcare? There is an incredible paper that was actually just released by Bill Gates today, talking about some phenomenal use cases for organisations and individuals and startups to start building their own bots. Highly recommend it. So the real potential lies in what you can build on GPT and the variations, as well as what you're doing in your innovation process. So where can you start? For those of you who are really new to this, and this has been a first introduction, Erin and Carlos will drop some of these sheets around on your table, and this is essentially just the research that we have been doing. If you pop your phone on the QR code there, you'll be able to follow through to a dynamic page, which is going to include real time, how we are ranking the viability of this across all of the processes that we're using, and you can check out some of the research on there that's live right now. And a big thank you to Carlos and Erin, who did a lot of the research for this preso as well. So worth a follow today as well. So you probably need a robot, Ben's Bytes and Learn Prompting. I highly encourage those if you just want a starting point of what you can do for enterprise innovation. Ben's Bytes gives you daily updates of every single startup that is being released in the space, and they do a really small review of whether they're valid. You probably need a robot is quite funny as well, and these all have Discord pages where you can go in and have conversations with other people who are learning this in real time. Thank you for your time today.